handing on to other people. So I'll kick off with an introduction, and then we can no doubt open it up to other people, particularly Lisa and George, who have more of the technical expertise than I have. I built the original site builder site for Palms Green and Southgate 10 years ago when we first formed, just under about 10 years ago. So we've been living with that. Needless to say, it's got a bit untidy on the way. Then Lisa and George Howard joined we call it the national team, SiteWorks team.
Yeah.
And they did that because we have a mutual interest in bridge. And I think Steve Carter, I'm not sure what his position is, but apart from being a bridge player in the total scheme of things, but I think you arranged yourselves into a team. Is that right, George and Lisa?
Subject advisor for bridge.
U3A subject advisor.
Yeah, I know, but we're in the context of SiteWorks. I think you're in a little team, aren't you? That happens to be headed up by a guy called Steve Carter. Is that right?
He just seems to giddy them up occasionally. I don't know what his position is within that.
No,
team.
okay. Well, he's a volunteer as well. So George and Lisa came to us and said, would we like to be a pioneer site? And I said, oh, yeah, that'd be interesting. I'm on the committee. George is now on the committee. And I would say the committee itself is divided probably about 1/3 who are reasonably interested in websites and IT, and the 2/3 who don't really care, to be quite honest. But anyway, it was agreed, obviously, that we would look at that. And the earliest email I can find is from July, but it might have started before that. It might have started work before that. Is that right?
Yeah, we were trying a migrated site. I don't know, about March, I think.
Okay, well, yes, you were looking at that option, and then you came back and said you were going to try a starter site. And I guess my involvement started, I think, in about July, because the main thing first thing we had to do is look at what we've got in terms of data. Now, as you know, it's a moving target when you've got groups, and we had very recently moved over to Beacon in last January. So we did have that as a sort of master list, near enough, but then we keep on forming new groups. So we used that as a master list, and then George and Lisa came and said, well, we need some information, obviously, from that list to move across, adding some fields in a table in an Excel spreadsheet. So we worked together to do that. And I think I'm really going to hand over then, if there are no burning questions at the moment, to hand over to George and Lisa to describe what happened next. Yes, Derek has.
I've got sorry to interrupt the flow, but yeah, I mean, that what you've said there is interesting, particularly in terms of the choice between a migration site or starter site. So my understanding was, in fact, I've asked the question through the SiteWorks team, and they said they're not offering starter packs yet. They were concentrating on the migration program. So I was surprised to see that you were accepted as a pioneer site on the basis of.
Sorry, that's not true, Derek. That's not true.
Well, you can opt for a starter.
You can make your choice, although we do advise you have a look at your migrated site first before making that decision.
Okay. Well, that's it. That's good to know. Thank you. So some of you all know, but Graham, you better explain your sort of background, your position on the SiteWorks team.
I joined the SiteWorks team back in February, and I think my main role is going to be migration lead. So I've got 15 volunteers lined up to basically work with once what we call web managers are trained, then they'll be allocated a migrator who will basically give them consultancy advice and order their live site, etc.
Thanks. Okay, sorry, George and Lisa.
Okay, so I think, I can't remember now precisely, but I think we started with white
White Cliffs.
White Cliffs, and they were migrated, and we were looking on that site as well. But I think right early on there were some problems with migration, which have no doubt been fixed now anyway. But because of the problems, we just thought it would be easier to maybe, and Steve wanted to see how a starter site would work. So yeah, it was about June time, I think, we started with the starter site, which is kind of empty site, but it's got a few templates in it so that you know what you're doing. And that was pretty easy to get the CSVs for uploading of contacts, groups, venues, events. I think that was it.
From Site Builder.
From Site Builder, and stick them in and just do them. I mean, PGS only have about 50 groups, so it's not a huge task. So it was basically, you put in the for that you put in the title of the group and some of the data, and then we just did cut and paste from Site Builder into SiteWorks, into the WordPress for the words that were on Site Builder, and then we fiddled around with some of them to maybe put some pictures in and things like that to try it out. But we started afresh. I think in August we lost the site for some reason. Then we got it back shortly for a while, and then we started again about, I think it was October, starting afresh with the new site,
The live site.
And it was pretty easy, really. If you haven't got an awful lot of groups and whatevers, it's pretty easy, I think, doing the starter.
When you say live site, then
Well,
do you get a sort of time to test it before you actually go live?
When we say live, it's the site that was going to go live, so there was no more taking it away and starting again. It was that was the site that was going to go live.
Well, it's called maintenance mode, isn't it?
Yes.
We'll know this. You go into maintenance mode, and actually if people have got a login, you can let them have a look at, the end product, if you like, which we didn't do until right at the end. Well, we had about 3 or 4 days when we let group leaders have a look at the site, but basically we've done so much checking. The other thing I would point out is that it does give you an opportunity to restructure slightly, and saying, well, I didn't really like that there in the first place, it didn't really work. So we've had a tinker around, but basically you'd recognize the main buttons, but sometimes the underlying stuff is slightly different, and reviewing text which looked quite old-fashioned and out of date in some places. So I mean, I'm really emphasizing you do need to review what you've got and just see. But with group leaders, they don't always provide you with any new information at all. And I've chased them, and you don't get 100% response. And then when we went live, I said, please check your site now. Well, just sort of pre-going live. I gave them a link and said, check. And you get a few coming back, but not many. And then you see things mention COVID, and I hate that. So, going back to people or just deleting the words. So there's been a bit of editing going on as well. And in the meantime, of course, things start changing.
Can I say something? Is that all right, Derek?
Yeah.
Yeah. So our site is really quite simple. And I was really thinking about starting from scratch because there isn't that much. And also I thought it's a really good way of doing a cleanup, because some of the stuff on the site is so old now that I thought if I built it from scratch, then I'm making positive decisions about what to carry with me. And the other thing was, and this is the bit I'm a bit confused about, I thought if I built it from scratch, then the old site can just continue, and then I just go live with the new site when I'm all happy with it. I just changed the redirection, the registration, what you call it. Yeah, so that is my understanding correct about that I can do that? I can build the site, leave it there until I'm happy, and then just change the redirection to go to the new site.
Yes, that's more or less what we did. We put an embargo on any changes to the old site about 3 weeks prior to going live. And because we have quite a few group leaders who had a login and said, sorry, you mustn't change anything else. They physically could have done, but they didn't, because otherwise you're constantly chasing changes. In fact, I think it was 3 weeks, but it didn't matter too much because it was sort of a quietish period in early November. So
Okay.
early to mid-November. So there has to be a point where you say no more changes on the old site. In my opinion, you know, we're moving over very soon, but you need to be seeing the end. The end must be in sight.
Okay.
I think that
our
experience from the migrated site is about 6 months old and therefore probably out of date a bit. But migrated isn't just that was it there and that was it there and it's going to work. I think you've still got to work on it in the WordPress to tidy it up and whatever. And really, if you've only got a small site, I would say a starter is better, because you know what you're doing, really. You've got more control over it.
Also, it makes you very familiar with the new site because you built it yourself. I've seen I was supposed to be chairing this, and Derek has his hand up for some time, and then Andy wants to say something. Do you want to say something first, Derek?
Just 2 questions then, in reverse order. So that the switchover, presumably again, that's helped or done by the SiteWorks team, or did you have to do that and is that involved in itself?
It was very simple, but there were several things that had to happen. And I mean, it had to be done as a checklist anyway. The main thing right at the last minute, obviously, is to tell SiteWorks and then ask Site Builder to redirect, which they did at about 2 hours' notice. So they're very quick.
Site Builder, because I've registered with another company for the redirection.
Well, where's it redirecting to? It hasn't got anywhere to redirect to at the moment, has it?
No, we registered hackneyuthra.co.uk. That's
Sorry, Hattie. That must go to U3A sites, because I went Hackney U3A and I've got u3asites.org.uk/Hackney. So that must be where it's hosted.
Yeah, but some Islington's the same in terms of we don't use the Site Builder hosting. We have our own domain name, which still looks very similar with U3A in it, and we have our own hosting arrangement. So I'm not sure if the switchover will be as easy for the SiteWorks team, but in principle it's the same in terms of switching from pointing to one domain, one name, and one hosting site to the new domain name and the new hosting site.
I think
it looks as if a Hackney site is hosted by U3A sites, which is slightly different from yours, isn't it, Derek?
I'm not entirely sure of Hackney.
No, but anyway, I'm sure those little things can be ironed out. What Site Builder does is they set up a whole load of links that point, not just one link, but lots of links from groups and all sorts of other things to map directly across onto SiteWorks, which is quite clever. You're the Site Builder editor or admin person, which presumably is Hetty.
Yeah.
Yeah, you Hetty. You'll find there's a new feature appears in the admin, and you can see. I'm not sure at what stage that appears, but anyway, but you can see all the links. That if somebody did actually get onto an old link, it would map straight across to the new one. It all seemed to work very, very smoothly.
Okay,
anyway.
I'm really confused now.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't worry about that for a minute until you've actually thought about your site and whether you're going to make a starter site and so on.
I've decided I want to do a starter site because I think it'd be really good, because there's very few pages and there's still lots of mention of COVID and stuff, and it will force me to take all that stuff out. So I'm going to start from scratch.
Andy wanted to say something. He's been waiting a long time. but we can't hear him yet.
Yeah, thank you. The big decision on whether you go starter site or migration obviously depends not just on the quality, but on the quantity of, in particular, groups. Can you tell me how many groups did PGS have, please?
About 50.
About 50. It's about the same as us. Yeah.
Got a membership of just under 500. So
yeah.
But
I think
because of the way we set up new groups, some of them sort of sit in the middle. They're not quite published. The group, we have bite-sized groups, and it's sometimes a bit ambiguous as to whether that's a real group. At some stage they have to be put across. So it's a sort of every 3 months we have a new members meeting, and then we may get some new groups, but we don't necessarily publish them until they're established.
I think, to be honest, we're reasonably happy with the quality of the text within our groups, and so it might be more better for us to migrate rather than to be a starter site. But that's our decision. Thank you.
One thing we found on the copy and paste across, a lot of the narrative at the end would say to contact so and so or the group convener via the Bluebird. So you've got to.
Yes.
Lost somebody. Well, you could do that at the. You could think about doing that on the site builder site if you are going that way before you migrate it. Just for a matter of a few weeks. Yeah, little things like that, you have to read them through and make sure when you get them on the new site, whatever you're going to do, that they actually make sense, and say something like, if you have a query, contact the convener above, because you've got a little bit at the top of each group. And if you haven't looked at existing sites, I would look at Evesham, Ours, Whitecliffe Country, Hunstanton. There's a few around.
Thank you.
Yeah, we put all the links up for the through the map to those other sites through the last webmasters meeting. So I'm hoping that everybody here has already looked at a product, a live SiteWorks site, so they kind of know what it looks like generally and the general layout.
Phil wanted to ask a question. Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. I think this might answer Hattie's query as well, actually, because in Ealing we use Site Builder for our website, but we've also got the domain name u3aealing.org.uk registered, and all that does is redirect to the Site Builder site. So obviously, when we swap to SiteWorks, we will just need to alter that redirection ourselves to redirect to the SiteWorks site, as well as the Site Builder doing the redirection as well.
It's interesting because I've been looking at the stats, and because I let the site settle, we let the site settle for 3 or 4 days, and then I thought I'm going to send out a beacon email, because I'm also the beacon administrator, to everybody. And we immediately got about 100 hits. So, so quite a lot of people have looked at it, and nobody's come back whinging. We've had very favourable comments. So that's bumped up the number of people who have visited the site considerably. What Google hasn't quite caught up yet.
Yeah,
I don't quite know how Google at Graham might retire. I don't know how Google actually does its searching, or when it forgets. How can we tell it, Graham? Do you know how to forget the Site Builder site? Does it just fade away eventually?
Well, it'll discover it isn't there. It'll discover that it gets a redirect to SiteWorks. So the search engines will, within minutes, give up.
Okay, well, it hasn't happened yet. And the other little task to do when you go live is to look, do some Google searches and see where else is pointing to Site Builder. We had a few like that. There's the obvious ones, like you're on a local forum or something, or a council website, or that sort of thing. So there's a bit of checking, but it's all kind of listed out what you need to do. I think the biggest thing, if I may just say before Derek comes back, is that it does give you more features. Pictures are a lot easier. Lisa and George, you've done a Guten slider, is it called?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it gives you much nicer features for layouts and things which are worth exploring, and maybe have a look at other sites and see what they've done. Just has a much more modern feel to it, but that's the disadvantage. Just do a migration, it won't necessarily pick up the new features. You'll have to add those things, try them out and add them in.
Did we mention local?
No.
Just I was wondering, that timeline that you talked about, had you any WordPress experience before, or does that time include just getting to know WordPress?
No, the first 3 months were on and off, getting used to WordPress and seeing what was in there. And I'm still trying stuff out now.
It's partly as a result of me saying, oh, it'd be nice to have a last updated date at the end of the groups page and things. I mean, George, Lisa and George are experimenting and adding features in. You know, it's never going to be completed, and you know, trying different things out partly is a learning curve. I'm not an expert on WordPress at all, and I'm afraid I didn't actually do the 168-page tutorial or whatever it is, but I'm relying on the other two.
Well, that's again a follow-on question, I guess, in terms of, I mean, I have actually read the training guides, and I believe they're being updated, you know, as more is discovered, really. So by the time I actually need to do anything, I'll probably need to go back. But did you use the guides? Did you find them useful, or does it only sort of...
There were no guides at the start.
Right.
So it was just a case of playing. When we got the guides, it then showed me another way of looking at something, and there was a couple of YouTube videos that we looked at, and it just shows you something. You think, oh, well, that must be in there, so we'll have a look and see how we can, if we can find where it is. So just finding stuff, really, and there's always several ways of doing something. Yeah,
that's the trouble. There are too many options, basically, and you've got to select the right ones. But experimentation is all, really. I've been looking or using a little bit something called Site Work User Guide Better Docs, and that you can look things up by topic. You do a user search. The trouble is, it says do this, do that. It doesn't. It's a bit lacking at the moment in examples for me, anyway. You know. Yeah. It tells you what to do, but it doesn't tell you what the result is necessarily.
Some other people have said that they read that and they don't really know what it's talking about. I think the migration, what was it, workbook for migrators, the 168 page is a better thing to sort of get you going, because it describes what you need to do. Better Docs tells you how to do.
Yeah, it's a mixture of the two. It's horses for courses here. I, in all honesty, haven't got too involved in the technical side of SiteWorks. I'm just treating myself as an editor, a user, if you like. I mean, I'm able to add users, for example, and attach them to groups when I remember. And, you know, I can amend a group, but not necessarily do anything fancy. But I think for the person who's actually going to migrate it or make a starter site, I think you do need, more knowledge. Graham's saying he likes something. Got his hand up as well.
The user guide is what it says it is, in that once you've gone through all the training, it's just to remind you how to do things. So the workbook is the one that takes you through everything.
Sure.
And I think
Yeah.
the other point to make is that WordPress, the internet and YouTube and everything else is absolutely heaving with guides and how to do stuff. And the SiteWorks team, don't really feel the need to sort of rewrite that for our benefit. So, so just doing basic editing in the blocks and things like that is something for it's something that's well documented on the internet. Now, what I do think is needed is perhaps some links to some good quality ones that are relevant to the sort of things we do.
Well, I expect in time, probably a lot of the sort of practical stuff of adding events, for example, and changing stuff in groups will be shown as examples. But it's early days. You guys who've done this on the SiteWorks team, you've done the basic stuff, and then I'm sure it will get enhanced, a bit like the beacon stuff, and hopefully there'll be more of a help desk situation for people who go, oh, I've got stuck on this, how do I do it? Mark, I think, wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned a moment ago about editors. I'm looking at an editor in terms of the person actually doing the mechanics of putting stuff into SiteWorks. Do you have one person or a small group of people, or do you allow the different group leaders to be able to modify their own pages? How have you run that?
Okay, well, we have an administrator, or several in our case. So we administrators have got rights to everything, a bit like comparable to Site Builder. And then you've got, to get this around the right way, editors who can edit anything but don't have rights for adding users or anything or doing anything too disastrous. And then you've got the next category is authors. And these are the one that we are allowing group leaders, if they request it, they can be an author for their own groups or multiple groups actually, but you have to assign it. If they're running 3 groups, you have to go onto each group and assign that to that person.
And those authors, do they have to have any training? How complicated is it? And can they do things like add pictures? We've got one group who wants to put pictures of birds. They do a bird watching group and they want to be able to put their own pictures. That sounds to me a little bit more than just a standard author.
It's horses for courses, really, Lisa, because some of a small number are reasonably competent anyway, a very small number on Site Builder, and we've given them, just let them loose on it, and they've come back with questions from I can't do a thing to just doing something simple. I don't think necessarily running, training courses is going to really, at a local level is really going to help that much. Lisa, in your experience, but some people, Lisa and George, have given some individual help too, haven't you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I think something that was said in one of the meetings that we did, the regular Monday meetings, it's in their mind to create an easy document for authors to use, to get used to it. But that's kind of in the future, I think.
That will be useful. It's like how to add an event, being something very specific to U3A SiteWorks, like how to add an event and with by the way, one thing we haven't mentioned is there's an interesting new feature. If you've looked at one of the other websites, you may have seen it, and that's to put groups in categories. So you might want to think about that before you even launch into doing anything. Have a look at the categories. Some of them are fairly standard and obvious, but George and Lisa, I don't like travel and whatever it is, travel and sport, because we don't have any sport. The jury's out on that one. We can set our own categories, but there are the obvious ones like languages, science, history, however, but you have control over them. So you might want to download a list of your groups, which will be needed anyway, and start categorizing them and playing around with them. Hopefully not too many of them will end up with a category called general. Not too many. It's inevitable. Where do you come down? You'll have to decide how your groups sort of look as a patterns. I would fiddle around with them, get a list and on a spreadsheet and fiddle around with them and see how they look when you put them into categories, because you can search on a category. And I like that. I think that's good. Somebody's
Yeah.
looking for a walking group, they go on to, on. Anyway, was it Derek and then Mark coming back, or the other way around?
I've got a new
Mark?
question, but Derek can go first.
Well, I think you were first. Anyway, I heard somebody mention under their breath local. So did you work on local before at all?
We never got it working. I've tried on 3 different computers and it fails all the time. I emailed Nick quite a few times, but it was never resolved. So we just moved on to.
Just gave up.
Yeah.
I think we're not alone. I gather other people have had the same problem.
Well, I think from what I've gathered, I did start and play around with it, but then I realized you can't migrate from local. So anything that kind of doing of value, I mean, it gives you practice, so to speak, in terms of functionality, but it's not worth setting up anything in local, because then you've got to do it all again in the real site work. So I gave up.
That's the nice thing about a starter site, because
We've lost you, Lisa.
Yeah,
You're frozen.
Frozen again, yeah.
While we're waiting for them to come back, can I ask a question? You mentioned at the start about having a spreadsheet with to help you with this transition, and you mentioned that you were thinking about collecting other bits of information onto that spreadsheet. Can you let me know what sort of bits of information you were adding into that spreadsheet to help transition the sites?
Yeah, one of the things was to do with what's called the status. I think it's called the status in SiteWorks. Is it active and accepting new members? Is it active? Is it full but but has a waiting list, or full, and that's it. Now that doesn't quite match with Beacon. So there's been a bit of sleuthing around there to try and find out, what they really mean by full. Is the group really full? Sometimes group leaders, we call them conveners, come and say, oh, my group's full, but it doesn't show up because we're very new to Beacon. It doesn't necessarily show up on Beacon. So there's a little bit of jiggery pokery, if you like. And at the moment, when you look on the groups list, the actual list, the whole list, you see it says active or full. But when you delve a bit deeper and click on the group, there are different sorts of active. So do have a look at what you need. So that was one of the things George and Lisa said, this is what we need. Basically, it's the group, the leader, and its sort of status were the main things. So however you're going to produce that, obviously if you've got Beacon, that's easy. Otherwise, you've probably got something on the spreadsheet anyway that you can adapt.
I've suggested that George and Lisa switch off their camera because of their bandwidth issues. So they are still there, by the way. But
they live in a dip. They live in a dip.
Sorry about this.
We've got kicked off 3 times so far.
Can I just clarify? It's the name of the group, the status of that group with various options, active accepting new members, or full, or what have you, and then who the leader is and which category you want to put that group into.
Yeah, that's more or less it. I can't think of anything else at the moment. This is straight off the top of my head, but anything that's
okay. Thank you very much.
I'm sure Lisa would give you the headings for that.
Thank you.
I have an old piece of paper that tells me what's required for the CSVs for import.
Yeah, it is documented somewhere, but that's broadly it. Ditch. Are you using Beacon, Mark, or something else?
Yes, we use Beacon, and we've got a lot of this information. Category is something we haven't delved into yet, but we can do that. And then the nature of this activeness, we haven't got the full details that you said.
No,
but
exactly.
we generate that
in Beacon. If you've got 12 members and you've set the maximum at 12, then the group is defined as full in Beacon. But you might need to do some checking as well, because obviously not everybody tells you the status. And you can do that if you export from the do a data export just on the groups, I think you'll find a CSV file kicks out, and you can work
Lovely.
on that then. It
Thank you very
doesn't
much.
seem to come straight out of an obvious screen like that. You get this list.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Gone quiet. George and Lisa, we can't see you. Did you want to say something?
Or any other questions?
They're frozen again.
Got one or two people who haven't said anything, so maybe throw it open to anybody else. In terms of planning, I mean, I've no idea because I only know how we were affected. I mean, if somebody puts their flags up today that they want to start, are they going to be able to do that in the near future, or is there such a big queue that they won't be able to start for a bit?
I don't know if Graham knows the answer to that one even. I mean, in terms of the migration schedule again, I mean, that's a key thing that everybody wants to know nationally. And I'm again maybe putting words in Graham and the team's mouths, but I believe they still wanted more sort of confidence on the rate of getting the migration, the pioneer sites up and running. Go on, Graham.
Well, the current pioneers are basically what you could describe as early testers. So they've got sites that are live or nearly live, depending on whether they've signed their terms and conditions or not yet, which the trust insists on before they can be publicly facing. Then there's what we call a pioneer phase 3, which is now going to start in January because there's been delays in getting our help desk up and running. And that is about testing our processes and not the software. So that's making sure that the migration team know what to do. It means the induction engagement team know what to do, and then we keep all the systems up to date, etc. But that will just basically flow into taking up new sites who, as they sign their terms and conditions. So I think they're going to ask the trust to send out something like 50 requests for terms and conditions just to build up a bank of, because some U3As are taking, have to wait to the next committee meeting, and that might be 2 months away before they can agree the terms and conditions and sign them. So
that was what I was, sorry, go on. Yeah, that's what I was going to comment on, that if you're thinking about doing this, I'd get the terms and conditions now and take them to your next committee meeting. I mean, there's no opportunity to change them anyway, but, warm up your committee. I take it most of you are on the committee, so that they're forewarned is forearmed. And then when we got them, there was a delay in getting these terms and conditions, but we were on the starting block. Effectively, we got the agreement anyway, and it was a formality. So just get that signed by the secretary. So,
but I think the process, Francis, is as Graham kind of said, it's the trust that issues them out. They're not live, so you can't look at them. I mean, I happen to have a copy, but they're not live, so you can't sort of the U3As can't download them themselves and get approval, so they're ready. It's more a matter of the trust is scheduling it 50 a month or whatever, and pushing them out in batches like that.
Sure. Okay. Phil's been waiting patiently for ages.
Thanks, Francis. I think in a way my questions may be for Graham, really, because obviously Francis, you've gone down the sort of new site approach, but I'm just wondering if Graham could perhaps say a little bit about the sort of the conversion from an existing site and how that's sort of progressing, and if there's any sort of issues that have shown up from that side of things.
Okay, well, if there is a checklist of things to look through your site builder site to make the migration more smoothly, but the only real issue I think is with a few characters that don't map over very well, but they're basically just 5 minutes editing to fix, and you'll get a report saying double check this page. It might not format 100% correctly because of some characters that were a problem. but essentially it gets all your images and attachments copied over, and it creates like for like pages with Site Builder. And you just literally probably need to spend, you know, I guess between, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes a page just checking it and tidying it up. So basically, it just gives you a really big leg up. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you can just simply delete all the pages and all the media, and, you know, virtually select all and delete in a matter of minutes, to be honest.
One thing is, yeah, on Site Builder, putting pictures up was a bit of a pain, to say the least of it, and so were documents. Lot easier. So we have been running a little campaign to try and get some more photos, you know, so that ultimately we might end up actually with one photo per group, but that's been hard work so far. So it's a kind of hunting around for photos. You can start collecting those as well. Think about what you want to put on the page, you know, to make it look more modern. Because honestly, putting a picture up was such a pain. We didn't really want to do it anyway.
Sorry, just a little follow-up again, perhaps for Graham. The Bluebird links on the pages, how are they sort of processed in the conversion process then?
These are contact forms.
Yeah.
You probably, you'll have to probably put the email address behind the form and set that up, I suspect. Yeah.
Yes, you have to supply email. Just on the import, you have to supply, if you're, I can't speak for migration, but yeah, they do end up in a contact list. So obviously you do need a list of, that would be one more thing to supply, is the convener and group leader and their email address. And if you look at one of the sites, you'll see there's a standard blocker in the non-technical sense at the top, which always has the name of the group leader and a hyperlink. So you don't really need to tell them to link on it. For most people, it's probably fairly instinctive.
But on Site Builder, you have your contacts page on there, don't you, which has all the email addresses, which links back to
same
things
thing
like your group pages. But does that automatically get picked up in the conversion process, or do you have to do something with it?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but I guess it must get picked up if you're migrating, but not if you're starting.
Yeah, sure, yeah. But do you know, Graham, is that the case that the?
I'm pretty sure it'll copy over the contact list. Yes. Yeah.
But the contact list isn't just maybe your committee members and role, is it? It's a bigger contact list of group leaders, which is important for the group pages. What we have found interesting enough, it's useful to put venues in as well. And what we found is if you've got a group without a venue, you don't name something that's in your venue list, a bit like it matches onto Beacon, then you seem to get a blank line at the top, which is a bit annoying. And you think, why have I got a blank line then? It's because the venue's missing. So another little data thing to think about, you know, venues. Get them in if you can.
Works fine if you go into the town hall, but not so good if you're a bird watching group that goes to different venues.
Well, you put various or private home or something, or Zoom or whatever. Yeah, but it was just a little quirk that we discovered. Why is there a blank line there? Oh, there's no venue. It doesn't put venue and leave it blank at the moment, but it might change in the future.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to keep this to about an hour. But if you do have other burning questions, put your hand up. Before we finish, I'm going to do a little, well, go on, Martha, you go first.
Yeah, sorry,